Aloha, and welcome to another edition of A Better Day. I'm Sam Slom, and this is the State Senate Minorities programming of A Better Day. And for the next half hour, we're going to be talking about some current issues that involve you here at the legislature and in the community. And so we hope you'll join us, and I have a special guest coming up in just a few moments to talk about the most important thing to you when it comes to the state legislature. Well, wow. Can you believe it? We're in June already. We're going to be halfway through 2016. Where does the time go? And how does it go so fast? We know the legislative session went from January through early May, and now we've got the interim, which means we don't get to play, but we still have some meetings with constituents. We've got some briefings. We've got a couple of hearings and things to do. So actually, this is our hint to you. If you want to talk to your legislator or to any legislator about a project or about something that you're particularly interested in, particularly for next year, 2017, this is the time to do it because we have more time. There's less activity going on a regular basis. So make an appointment. Come in and see your legislator. Come in and talk to the committee head that may be shepherding the bill or the legislation you're interested in, okay? So that's a tip. Okay, now what else is happening in our community? Oh my God, the rail, still yet. Do you remember, come on, tell me the truth. Do you remember when we talked about this project back in 2005 at $3 billion, and then it went to 5, and then it went to 6, and then it's at 8, and it's on its way to 10 and beyond, and they have no limitation on it. And that's the problem. As long as they've got the taxing powers and they've got the ability to spend and Hart gets away with murder, the project's got to be stopped. Come on, folks, we got to stop it. That's the best thing that we can do at this point. Yeah, we've wasted a lot of money. We spent a lot of money, but we can't go keep spending good money after bad. It is a project that never will work, will never be finished, and we're talking about only the construction money. We're not talking about operation and maintenance. Call your legislator, call your congressman or woman, and tell them they've got to help stop the rail. By the way, you know, we're always talking about the federal money we're getting, the $1.15 billion. We've gotten like a third of that to date. So all of the talk about there'll be penalties if we stop or if we change and all that, forget about that, because whatever that is, it'll be far less than continuing on this road to destruction. Look, we've got sewage bills, we've got water bills, we've got highway bills, we've got all kinds of things that we have to do with the money that is being taken out of our community right now. So stop the train, okay? What else did we do during the 2016 legislative session? It was kind of a different session. It was a lot quieter than we've been used to. The supplementary budget was supposed to be the marquee, but we got talking about tax increases from labor unions and others. We got talking about adding more personnel at the state level. We certainly were talking about health care and marijuana. We continue to talk about marijuana. People would think that our legislature is very interested in marijuana. And the first 8 of the dispensaries have been announced, and they should be up and running by July. We'll see. There's going to be glitches in the program. But again, when anybody tells you it's all about medical marijuana, it's not. It's about the money. It's always about the money. So follow the money, excuse me. Anyway, we had all kinds of things that we talked about, but very little that was actually accomplished. And that's not necessarily a bad thing. The big thing was air conditioning for the schools, which we've talked about for, 10, 15 years now. Well, a major commitment was made, $100 million to air condition the schools. Now, I don't think we're going to use all that money. I don't think we have to. I think there'll be other alternatives that would be made, but at least it shows the commitment. There was also money for out-of-school activities. My position during the session was I don't support any additional out-of-school activities. Our priority should be in the classroom. That's it. That's where we need to raise test scores. We need to improve our education, not outside activities. People argue all the time. They say, well, the outside art activities make for better students and all this. Look, we've already got outside activities. We've got boys clubs and girls clubs and Boy Scouts and Girl Scouts, and we've got athletic activities and all that. But every year we've got new groups that come in and they want the taxpayers to subsidize their particular program out of school. So I didn't support those, and I still say our priority should be in classroom instruction. We had a number of other programs that didn't get through this year, but again, overall, most people were saying it was a pretty quiet legislative session during an election year. But the big thing was the budget and how the budget was arrived at, and some of the things that went in the budget, some of the things that did not. There were an awful lot of people that applied for grants and aid, the GIAs, over 200, and many of them were not funded. Some of them were partially funded, but it's a growing situation. Every year we've got all of these organizations coming in and they want your funds to fund them. My position on this has been, look, let these organizations, particularly the startups, let them start up and let them show us that they're doing a good job. And if they need partial help for a very limited period of time and a very limited amount, then we can consider it. But too many people come here and they expect the taxpayers to support them and their projects. That's something that we have to change. Other than that, what can we say we did for the business climate and for you and your high cost of living? In a word, nothing. We didn't improve the business climate. We didn't make it more hospitable. We didn't make it more incentivized. And for you who are paying among the highest taxes in the country and the highest cost of living, we didn't do anything. But we're spending an awful lot of money on the homeless, on programs for the homeless, over $100 million so far, and there's no limit in sight. We're building housing. We're giving them services. We're giving them food. We're giving them all kinds of things. And in effect, we have created a special class for the homeless, and many of them are not from here. My priorities would be homeless veterans and those that are working, those people first, with the understanding that we can give them, a help up, but not a permanent situation. And yet we're spending a great deal of time diverting a lot of resources and money for people. Meanwhile, our regular folks are still struggling. They're struggling to pay their bills, to take care of their children, to take care of their needs. We're going to have to do a better job. And yet, spending money on projects like the rail and on other projects that are not really priorities, these hurt us because they diminish our ability and our lack of resources. Well, what all this leads up to is the budget. Now, don't go rolling your eyes at me. I know that people don't like to talk about fiscal items, and yet you have to, because we have to know where the money comes from, why it's not coming at the same rate it was before, and how we're spending much more than we're earning. That's what we have to do. Well, couldn't have anybody better today with us to talk about this than my budget director, the budget director for the Senate minority, Mr. Paul Harleman. Paul has been with us before. He is well experienced. He's very knowledgeable about not only our state operating and CIP budgets, but our alternative budgets as well. So Paul, welcome back.
Thank you, Sam.
You've been here before.
Yep.
Give, for those people that don't know you, give us a little Paul Harleman 101.
Paul Harleman 101. Yeah, sure. Well, I'm Paul Harleman. I've been the budget director at the Senate minority since 2012. Prior to that, my first experience in government was with Governor Lingo. I was an intern during her last year. Other than that, my background is in finance. I moved from the Netherlands to Hawaii to do my MBA at the time, and yeah, that's how I landed the job with you, the Senate minority, and yeah, I've been I joined the Senate minority in 2012, and I've been there ever since.
Well, you've done an outstanding job. You've broken new ground. We have some new projects which you can talk about and all.
Yeah.
But our whole thing has always been to be transparent.
Definitely.
Make the information known. Let people know that there's really no mysteries about the budget, how it works, what it does. So maybe what we should do is just go through a primer. How does the budget process start? What are the processes it goes through? The operating budget in the odd-numbered years, and then the supplemental budget in the even-numbered
Yeah,
years.
so the actual process starts with the governor that introduces his budget. That normally starts or there's a deadline. The governor has to submit a budget to the legislature before December 28th. So prior to the session, the governor submits his budget. Then it's up to the legislature to look at the governor's budget and to make changes.
And it goes to the House first.
It goes to the House first, so the House will have their own budget, and then it crosses over to the Senate, which will make changes to the House draft, and then there's a final conference committee that will pass a final budget.
So really, we're talking about 4 different steps.
There's
the
4
governor,
different drafts,
House, Senate, and conference committee.
Correct. And it's a fairly complicated process, difficult to track. So transparency is a very important issue. And even for me, I work at the Senate. It's very difficult to get access to certain data, and I think we've done a good job.
So even though we talk about being transparent,
yeah,
as a legislature and all,
correct,
we could be more transparent.
We can be more transparent, definitely, definitely. And I think we did a fairly good job over the years to improve transparency. Mm-hmm. And yeah, it's very difficult to track.
So just hard
items.
numbers, and just numbers that everybody can understand. Where did we start out with the governor's budget, and where did we finally end up?
Well, first of all, the 2-year budget that was passed last year started at $13.3 billion. So the governor came in.
That's per year.
That's per year,
of the
correct.
2-year budget.
So,
right?
so that was the base budget this year. Then the governor requested $507 million in additional funds. So it went up to the House and the Senate, and the final conference committee budget cut the governor's request by about $100 million. Mm-hmm. So the governor asked for about $500 million, and the final conference committee budget included $400 million in additional funds. Mm-hmm. So
this is one of those tricky things. We say that we cut the governor's budget, but it really wasn't the governor's budget. It was the additional 500, right?
So we're cutting the governor's increase.
The proposed increase. And that's what happens when people hear numbers and they get really confused, because they talk about this program was cut, it lost its funding or whatever. And in most cases, that's not true. What it lost was a portion of, or all of, the proposed increase, not the base budget itself. I mean, people have visions that the legislature, the mean legislature, took all that money away from DLNR or from Department of Transportation. It doesn't work that way.
No,
does
it doesn't work that way. And it's kind of interesting. I started in 2012, and the budget in 2012 was $11 billion. And right now, within 4 years, we're almost at $14 billion, right? So that's over 4 years. We almost increased the entire state budget by about $3 billion. Mm-hmm. That's a very large number. And most of that, I mean, if we can go into details, most of that is for the pension payments and health care payments for state workers.
Is it true that nearly 70% of all budget expenditures have to do with payroll, compensation, retirement?
That's true. It's about 70% of the budget is payroll related. Some of it is salaries. A bigger chunk right now is the pension payments and healthcare payments.
And that's what we refer to as the unfunded liability.
Correct.
Unfunded because
they haven't been funded for decades.
Yeah.
So there's a big funding gap, and for the employment retirement system, it's about $9 billion right now, as well as for the Employer Union Trust Fund, which provides healthcare benefits to current and retired state workers. That's about $9 billion too. So if we do the math, that's about $18 billion in unfunded liabilities.
We're one of the highest states, aren't we?
We're one of the highest states.
Yeah.
And that's because some of the services that are normally offered to city and county governments are in our state are included with the state government. Mm-hmm. So we are much higher than other states, and On an annual basis, we're paying about $1.2 billion in annual payments to the Employment Retirement
And this
Fund
is
and
why
Employer Union Trust
I
Fund.
get so crazy when we talk about adding more employees, and everybody says we need more employees. Well, with more employees comes more salary, comes more benefits, and more debt that we're responsible for, right?
Definitely, and it's even the latest reports show that $1.2 billion is most likely going to grow to over $2 billion over the next 7 years.
Yeah.
So that's a big number, a big increase, and that's why we're seeing the government spending just go up and up and up every year.
Yeah. And that's why I say, I mean, people, you know, they'll get really interested in marijuana, or interested in a transportation project, but when you try to talk to them about the budget and about all these numbers, which are going to determine, you know, what choices they have in the future, they blank out. Now, we've done our best to try to make it simple and direct and explain it. But people just have a natural tendency, don't they? They just don't get interested. One thing that we should also add, and that is when the governor presents his or her budget, that budget is presented, it's for a 6-year total.
Correct. It includes a 6-year financial plan.
6 years. The legislature only works on the current 2 years.
Correct.
But if we looked at those back 4 years, Paul, what do we find?
Well, we find that there's annual deficits, which means that we're spending more money than we're taking in on an annual basis. So we're using our surplus, our carryover surplus, which is the money that we have in the bank, to fund those annual operating deficits. And we've been in a deficit position since Governor Abercrombie left. So this has been so for the last 4 years we've been in an annual deficit position, and looking at the financial plan, it looks like for the next 6 years we're still going to be in an annual deficit position, which means that we're spending our money that we have currently.
Now look, we have a
surplus.
requirement for a balanced budget, but in fact the budget that we passed this year was not a balanced budget, was it?
Not on an annual basis. It is balanced in the sense that we're using money that we have in the bank to pay for the current year for the expenses during this year.
So if you look to the 4 years coming up after that, and you said we're in deficit position each year. Okay? If we don't have money in the bank,
at some point, well, according to our latest estimates, this budget is only sustainable until fiscal year 2020. So that's only sustainable for about 3 to 4 years.
And then what happens?
Well, what happens is that we have to make cuts, or we will have to increase revenues. And we saw different measures that were introduced this year, asking for GET increases. So we could most likely see those similar measures being introduced next year or even the following year. And next year is an important budget year, and there's certain risk involved. So a lot of things could happen, of course, during the next 3 or 4 years, but the most conservative estimates indicate that it's only sustainable till
now
about
we're just
2020.
we're talking about one portion of it, and that's the revenue portion and the cash balance.
Correct.
You go to all of the meetings of the Council on Revenues, which the legislature is required by law to adopt, to take into consideration. They're talking about something else besides the revenues. They're talking about another recession.
The likelihood of a recession is very, very large. And also, actually, I have to say that yesterday the major investment banks came out, and the profits this year have been down during the first quarter. So we're having a very difficult time right now, and we've been growing. The economy has been growing for a number of years right now. So the risk for another recession is high.
And we're talking about not far down the road. We're talking about in the next couple of years.
Well, according to the Council on Revenues, definitely within the next 3 years.
3 years.
Yeah, definitely within the next 3 years. That's what they indicated in their last meeting, and it could be much sooner than that if we factor in the latest reports that were published by the banks yesterday.
What do you think the state should be doing that it's not doing now?
Well, one of the things is that the previous finance director, Mr. Young, he had executive budget cuts during his time, and currently Governor Ige, since he took office, he has extended those budget cuts.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that we need to continue that, and most likely the governor will come out with a statement sooner or later. But I think the governor should extend those cuts, and I think the legislature should make additional cuts when they are called into session next year.
We're talking to Paul Harleman, who is the budget director of the Senate minority and well experienced. Paul, what are some of the things that the Senate minority has been doing to make the budget process more clear, more transparent?
Well, transparency is a key for us. The Open Budget website, it's hawaiiopenbudget.com. We've launched that transparency portal last year, and it has been visited by over 10,000 visitors over the years. So people use our website to gain access, to get access on timely information pertaining to the budget.
Is this the interactive website?
It's an interactive website.
So that you can play around with budget figures, you can be a budget director yourself?
Correct.
Yeah.
It just makes it easier to gain access to critical budget and financial information.
Mm-hmm. What about our alternative budget?
We've also introduced alternative budgets every year. And there's some of the policy plans that we've been working on. One key element was to privatize the state hospital system. So we've worked very closely with HASC, the Hawaii Health Systems Corporation, which is known as the state hospital system.
Mm-hmm.
We've been working very closely, and we think that if we privatize that system completely, that taxpayers could save about $80 million on an annual basis. And
we're still subsidizing that system.
Well, the Maui portion, the governor last year privatized the Maui regional
and I think there's
hospital
still
system.
lawsuits from the labor unions pending on that.
Correct. There's still
Right.
lawsuits pending, but that's pretty much finalized. But if we privatize the entire system, that we believe that taxpayers could save about 80 to 100 million. Even our estimate is probably even conservative. It's probably even higher than $80 million.
And if people want to take a look at our alternative budget and the choices that we made, where can they do that?
On the alternative budget website, which is Hawaii Senate Minority Budget. I don't know the exact link.
Okay,
but
go to our website.
Yeah.
Find it from there. Okay.
Yeah.
What else are we doing, or what else you think can be done to make this process easier?
Well, I think to make the process, I think we've introduced a number of bills relating to transparency. I think one of the things is it would make it a lot more transparent and easier if the legislature introduces a financial plan in addition to the actual budget bill. Because right now they only introduce a budget, and a budget without a financial plan is not very helpful.
What do you think the likelihood is of that happening?
Well, I don't think that is going to happen, although the majority of the states do it.
Mm-hmm.
They do in their conference committee reports, or in their committee reports, they do have information relating to their estimates for their financial plan. So we don't have it, and that makes it very challenging, very difficult to get a clear understanding of what, of where the state is moving into as far as their finances. So that's one of the elements. The second element is a lot of legislation is passed with a lot of bills are being passed, and we don't know exactly how much spending is included in those bills. So
blank appropriations.
Blank appropriations all the way up to conference committee.
Mm-hmm.
So that's just a very bad financial practice. And you've introduced the fiscal impact statement bill for the last 10 years, I believe, or longer than that, and that will definitely help.
We get a lot of support outside, but we don't get the hearings, and we don't get any movement on it. And as you say, most states, they will couple their budget with some of these fiscal tools to make it easier for them.
Yeah, because if not, how do you know what you're voting on?
Yeah.
If you're voting on a bill that is blank, how do you know what you're voting on?
Gee, it's just like the rail
Yeah.
How do you know what you're voting on and what's the total going to be?
Exactly, and that's just a matter of transparency. And one of the biggest issues is the budget worksheets. We are a state, we vote on the budget and we publish the budget worksheets after we've voted upon it.
Yeah.
So that's just not a good practice when it comes to transparency. So that's definitely a major issue. It just makes the process not transparent at all, and it's very difficult for the public to get, to gain access to those budget worksheets. And it's not very relevant anymore after you've already voted on an item to then suddenly publish worksheets.
And by the way, on the open budget process,
Yeah.
Which you shepherded and started really last year, we've got other organizations that signed on and are helping us.
We've
with
got
that, right?
Common Cause, we've got numerous organizations that are helping us, and we're trying to make the website even better.
Yeah.
So that's what we're
So
gonna.
it's not a partisan website.
No, it's a nonpartisan
And
website.
people are welcome to join on if they have an interest or want to learn more about it, right?
Correct.
Okay. Okay. Do you have any final words of wisdom for us?
Well, I hope to see more transparency in the budgeting process, and I hope that we can get to the point where we will where we have access to the budget worksheets before we actually vote on the budget. I think that will definitely improve the transparency climate within the legislature.
Thank you, Paul. Our guest has been Paul Harleman, Budget Director for the State Senate Minority, and we've been talking about the budget. And if you have any further questions or want more information, please call my office, or you can call the Senate Research and Budget Office directly. Thank you for joining us today. We'll see you next month. And remember, we wish you not just a good day in Hawaii, nay, a better day. Aloha.